like to welcome anybody who decided to download this and listen to us to the first TheShiver Podcast with James Thomas hosting, along with Aaron Markowitz. You want to say hello, Aaron?
Yes, Aaron Markowitz here.
And we also have our guest for this week. We got Ryan Noel.
Yep, that's me, Ryan here.
And his famously positive take on all of our players we're looking forward to hearing. We also have Matt Scott with The Shiver, and he's here to give us his input on everything. Go ahead and say hello, Matt.
Hello, Matt.
Our hope is to do this show weekly. We promise you the highest quality show that one can have with about 8 minutes of preparation and spending no money whatsoever. So that's our promise to you, the listener. The important thing is we believe we can provide you more interesting information than your local media does with all of their money. So they haven't set the bar very high. Maybe we can pull ourselves over that. We'll just see how it goes. But
or any other Kansas website.
Amen.
That's just taking cheap shots, and we like to maintain a certain level of decorum and dignity on this show.
Maybe.
We'll see how it goes, but let's go ahead and start it. Your Kansas Jayhawks are 10-4, which for many fans who haven't been around for that long, it kind of you choke a little bit getting that one out. Haven't seen that a lot, but it's been a very tough schedule. You know, I'm not really sure where I thought the team would be. Maybe a win or two better. I kind of thought we'd get through the Bahamas tournament unscathed, and we didn't. Then again, it was a very close loss to Villanova. So what's everybody think about where the team stands? And, is it about what you thought?
Let's back up, and let's just say this wasn't a tough schedule. This was an insane schedule. This schedule would have been tough for an experienced bunch coming back off a deep NCAA tournament run. And that's not even what this team is. This is a team that's extremely young, has played extremely young, has very little leadership, even from the very few experienced players returning. Went 29 days between games at Allen Fieldhouse, played in a tournament that was more difficult than anybody imagined beforehand. I traveled down to the Bahamas. I expected us to get through that unscathed as well, James. But did anybody expect Villanova to be undefeated late in December? So I think the field was also a little more difficult than we necessarily
Clearly not
expected.
you. You thought Kansas would beat them.
That's right. But even after getting through that game, I didn't think Villanova would make it to late December. Did anybody else?
I didn't really.
They were impressive in that game. I mean, we had a clear size advantage against them. At that point, we still hadn't really established Embiid in the paint. And there was a huge difference in that game when he was on the floor and when he wasn't. But they bothered our guards, and pressure has bothered our guards all year. So it wasn't really shocking to me that I thought Villanova was good, and they beat a good Iowa team after they beat us. So coming out of that tournament, it didn't surprise me that they stayed pretty hot.
It's one of those things I look at is, first of all, Kansas was very early into the season, and Kansas is made up of guys, the starting five, who has the most starts, but maybe 16 or 17 in his entire career, and he's a junior. If you step back and look at it, outside of just being a Kansas basketball fan and what people think of Kansas and what Kansas should be and year in and year out, this team is so young and has so many young guys out there that really you got to have proper expectations and trust that they're going to learn and get better. And they have gotten better. Is there still things to work on? Absolutely. But, we're going to be able to see just how good teams like Villanova are as they go through their conference season as well. Although conference probably got a little bit, they didn't jump to the ACC either, did they? They just stayed in the Big East.
In the Big East.
Yeah, or whatever it's called now. But
nobody cares.
Yeah.
I mean,
whatever
their
the
first three
leftovers of
games,
the Big East are.
Their first three games in the Big East were Butler, Providence, and Seton Hall, and they only beat Butler in overtime.
And Butler's pretty good, but
yeah, and it was at Butler, to be fair.
Yeah, to me, it's just one of the things that it's more of a let this team mature, let them get going, let them grow up. My biggest thing about the schedule so far is there's no consistency of games. You either have 3 games in a week like we are right now, or you have a week off. There's no, every third day or whatever, there's no consistency in that. And when you're a young kid trying to juggle basketball, practice, school, travel, all that stuff, I mean, they literally got on campus and boom, it was all of this all at once. It's hard when you don't have that structure in place to really adjust to it. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing. And I think conference season could certainly help. The beginning of it won't help, but as you get into conference, having that consistency of, 2 games a week should help this team moving forward.
Was this schedule a mistake? I mean, I think it was. And I think the consistency of games was a big issue where we had just impossible to deal with gaps. But
I mean, it's pretty hard. I mean, doesn't Self have to schedule this pretty far in advance? I mean, in terms of each individual game is scheduled at such a different time, than what he can tell ahead of time what he's going to have on his roster that particular year.
It's not football in advance, but a lot of them are made up in advance. But they have some freedom to move it around a little bit before each season.
Right. I mean, infamously, Tom Izzo did that when we had played Michigan State and bombed them in Allen Fieldhouse, and then Izzo kept pushing us off, and miraculously got us coming off the title team with just Aldrich and Collins back with any semblance of experience. So there's some way to juggle that around. But this is a little bit of a perfect storm. I don't think Self even believed that we would go on the road to Florida this year. I think that was not necessarily the plan, but that's how the SEC Big 12 showdown worked out this year. Mm-hmm. And that kind of perfect storm in there, if you will, with playing New Mexico in the Sprint Center and playing Colorado in Boulder this year, led to a December with almost no home games. We haven't played a game with students on campus since November 21st.
Yeah.
And if you want to look at it this way, despite all the struggles and 4 losses, which, I mean, in Kansas basketball world, 4 losses is like crazy this early in the season. They're 18 points from being undefeated, and they're the youngest starting 5 in the country. That's pretty freaking good. And some of those are true road games against ranked teams.
Well, and I think somebody brought up the relevant comparison would be Michigan State in 2005 when they played at Kansas, home against Duke. They played a good Oklahoma team. They played a Kentucky team. They went on the road to UCLA, and they played Syracuse, and they lost all those games. They went into the Big Ten at 5-6. They did recover. They didn't go far in the tournament, but they're pretty similar to what this Jayhawk team is in that they were a good offensive team, and they never played Tom Izzo defense. I mean, that team finished 117th according to Ken Palm for defense. And I think we're better than that. I mean, we're 25th or something like that at the moment. But that's the scary comparison. That Michigan State team never did really fully get on track from what happened to them.
Well, I think during the broadcast last night, during the Oklahoma broadcast, I thought they brought up a good point. And I don't frequently agree with announcers, but I thought a good point that they made last night was that we didn't have a good opportunity to lengthen our bench. And some of the kids that I know Matt and Ryan and James, you guys and I talked about before the season maybe playing a bigger role on this team, the Brandon Greens, the Connor Frankamps, they didn't get a whole lot of time early in this season, and it'll be interesting to see how they develop going forward. We weren't able to lengthen our bench, and not that we play a really deep bench in conference season, not that Bill Self has ever been known for going 12 guys deep. But you don't have those guys to lean back on a little bit who've cut their teeth against some lesser competition. Andrew's been playing 35 to 38 minutes a game for a month and a half now, and that's just not something we're accustomed to seeing.
There is some truth to that, but some of that is just, as much as you might want to see guys, if they're not getting it done in practice, on both ends of the court, and a lot of fans look at it as offense. Hey, well, this guy can shoot, this guy can shoot. But if he can't defend, Coach Self's just he's not going to trust to play you. And we saw Connor a little bit last night, Nadir in foul trouble, of course, but Connor has been improving on that side of the ball. throughout practice. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, Nadir was great the last few minutes of the game offensively. He still was lacking defensively as we saw Jordan Woodard go right by him on one play. But offensively, he came up with some big shots. But I got to tell you, some of that stretch during that Oklahoma game, that offense the spacing looked better. The flow looked better with Connor out there. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
Oh,
But it might just be that game. It could be just that situation.
You're after my own heart there with being pro Connor Frankamp in the lineup. I may be one of the few, but I stated earlier today with somebody that I prefer the lineup with Connor on the floor than with Mason. And I have seen enough of the lineup with Tharp and Mason at the same time. We're just not getting much done when we go that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a boggling move because Mason, even though he's actually hit shots lately, in the last couple of games, he's actually hit shots when he's had the opportunity. It's interesting that Self selected to go with him and Tharp on the floor at the same time, and also not letting Mason handle the ball, but making Tharp still the point guard. It seems like Connor's a natural fit, to be playing alongside Tharp as an off guard, and hopefully maybe we'll see some more of that now that Connor hit a few shots. Seems to have gotten a little bit of confidence under him.
And he shot those with a little bit of swagger, too, which I like. I asked Coach Self in a post-game press conference earlier this year about when he played Frank and Nadir at the same time, that seemed to speed up the offense, which is what Coach Self ultimately wants. And his response was, yeah, but I shouldn't have to do that. Nadir should already have that going that fast. I shouldn't have to put Frank in there in order to speed it up. So I wonder if he's still inserting both of them to get the offense going faster.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things I've noticed with Frank is that, early in the season it was all about, he just wanted to drive. And I've noticed the last couple games, he gets in there and, he doesn't do a whole lot, but the ball doesn't stick in his hands. And Tharp, obviously, he's looking to shoot a little bit more, and he has that green light to take threes apparently. But you can tell when Mason gets in there, the only thing in his mind is, hey, the ball can't stick. I've got to move it side to side as fast as he can. And I think that's taken away from his natural instincts to just go, 100%.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that when you have somebody like Connor who can shoot, Connor's much different than Brandon as far as shooting. He's a quick twitch shooter. He likes to, go between the legs and fire before a defender can react. To me, if you got guys going up and down the court like that, that helps to play a player like that who can get the ball off, fire quick. Jay Billis actually brought up a great point, how these guys, a lot of them don't have their hand, they're not ready to shoot when they receive the pass. And I 100% agree with that. And a guy like Wayne Selden, who played great, his shot is a little bit slower to get up. His release is a little bit slower. And if his hands aren't up and ready to go, a defender flying at him, the timing's all off. And to me, if you got point guards that are trying to push everything, these guys got to be ready to go, especially with a team that doesn't get steals and doesn't get easy points in transition. They've got to be on it with the little times that they have been able to run.
Right. The thing about Connor, back to the question about Connor Frankamp, I've been, I think, had a bunch of conversations over the last month trying to understand why Connor Frankamp doesn't get more play. I get that he hasn't been great in practice. I get that he maybe is a step slow defensively so far this, in his career. That was a concern that I had over the summer. But he can't possibly be that much worse than what we've been throwing out there defensively. I mean, Matt, you could go around Tharp most days.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I could probably go around anyone. But, Tharp had foul trouble last night. You want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I'd say consistently throughout the season, there's just not – I mean, how great would Russell Robinson be on this team?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and what people don't realize is Self usually likes those bigger guards and tough on-the-ball defensive guards because they make the passer job harder. It's harder to make easy passes if you got somebody up in your grill.
Well, it just disrupts the offense.
Exactly. And this team misses that because, people want to get on Wiggins and Selden and all that. Think about this. They're not getting – how many open dunks did Ben McLemore have at this time last season? Because there were so many steals and you had Jeff Withey blocking shots all day long. they don't. Joel's gotten a lot better at that, but they don't get in the passing lane and make enough steals.
Well, and yeah, the defense has certainly been an issue, and we're going to circle. I think we'll circle back around to that here in a minute.
I think it's real quick. I think it's fair to point out too. Last year defensively, even though Kevin Young wasn't the best defender, he actually created quite a few steals.
He knew how to use the talent that he had. I mean, he was done if he got buried, but as long as he could get in front of people, he could
force a few turnovers here and there because he was pretty quick, and he at least got into the passing lanes, especially on the perimeter, and created a few things here and there that we're just not getting from anyone in the front court, no matter who it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Kevin Young's on this team. There's no way he allows San Diego State to get over 50 rebounds on Kansas.
No, not a chance.
Fieldhouse.
Given all that, kind of where does everybody feel the team's at as far as where do you think the ceiling was at the beginning of the year? Have your feelings changed on that? Having watched at this point, 15 games, we're 35, 40% of the way through the year. Does anybody think that we can't get where you thought we could, or how's everybody feel about that?
I think around. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I say, are we just going to go around? Who's going to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Aaron will start, and then we'll go to Ryan, and then we'll go to Matt. I think we can still get to where I thought we could be. It's going to take. I'm lamenting our lack of a lead guard more than anything. We don't get good opportunities to score for our guys. We don't get a whole lot of open dunks. We don't create steals. It's kind of a curse, if you will. We've been. So many people were so harsh on Tyshawn Taylor for so long, but, put Russell Robinson on this team and think about that. But put Tyshawn Taylor on this team and think about how this team would look with him. That being said, I think we can get to where we want to go. I think we're going to have to play a lot more from the wings than we've been accustomed to, and we're going to have to see a lot more of Wayne Selden from last night than what we've seen in large stretches of the season. He's also been very good at the start of some halves and at the start of some games. He was great at Colorado. He was great against Villanova early, helped build that lead that ultimately didn't work out. But I think if you see that kind of energy,
against Duke too.
He was a big key against Duke. He had 15, which was his career high before last night. So I'm concerned about lead guard. I think that's not a concern that will go away unless we miraculously switch to Connor Frankamp. Something of that nature. But I don't think there's anybody who's really great this year. I don't know that we're national championship good like I thought we might be before the season, but we have a lot of heart and we have a heck of a lot of talent. I think we can get to that Final Four stage and see where we go from there. So, Ryan?
Go ahead and skip over to Matt for just a second.
Okay. Ryan?
Sorry.
Or Matt?
Or Matt or Ryan. Yep.
I think that they can certainly get there. I mean, is there question marks? Yes. The funny thing is I really crack up, on Twitter during games when people try to criticize Wiggins. Does he need to finish better? Absolutely. But once he gets it, the sky's the limit, to be honest with you, because now you have that guy. And we saw against Duke. I mean, that he took the shots to ice the game, and that's exactly what Kansas needs. But my thing is for the point guards, defensively, if you're not going to be able to create steals and get out in transition and have those easy dunks, these point guards have to create shot opportunities for their teammates. They've got to make them better almost. And, you can't just throw it to Wiggins and expect him to be able to create his own shot every single time. That's not how it works. You got to have guys that set it up. And that needs to happen, in my opinion. And the same for Wayne Selden. To me, it's one of those things that, these guys are so young. They haven't played together that long, and they're coming together. And to be honest with you, win against Oklahoma at Oklahoma was a huge win. That's their biggest game. That's where the fans come out. That's the show. And they've been playing well. They've been putting up a lot of points. And Kansas went in there and really lost momentum right before halftime. Ended up still going into half with the lead and really controlled the game in the second half. Oklahoma had a little bit of a run, and then Kansas answered. And to me, You keep doing that you do that and dominate Kansas State on Saturday, and Iowa State, whatever happens, that kind of offense is going to play into what Kansas likes too, going up and down. You just can't let a team get hot from three. To me, they're getting into form offensively. It's a question of, are they going to be able to play what we know as Bill Self defense? Because to be honest with you, as soon as these ticky-tack fouls are called early in the game, these guys fear going near the opposing player of getting a foul called. And that worries me more than anything. And I wish that they kind of understood that those fouls go both ways. And if you start taking it to the rim, they're going to have to put you to the free throw line that many times as well. But to answer the question, yeah, I still think that they are national championship quality because I think Aaron's right. I don't think there's a great team out there now. And this is, over the next month you'll start to see separation from the contenders and the pretenders.
Well, I think you make a great point on the Oklahoma win. It's incredibly undervalued by people, particularly looking at how desperate OU had to be to get that game. They've got Iowa State at home this weekend, and then they're on the road at K-State and Baylor. I mean, they're staring a horrible start in the face after they put together a pretty decent non-conference against iffy competition, but they had put themselves in position to be thinking about going to the tournament. So that was a tough win that I don't think a lot of people are going to give us our proper due for.
Agree, and I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Iowa State with them as well.
Absolutely. Ryan, you want to go ahead?
I think in terms of just sheer, can they reach their ceiling talent-wise? Yeah, I mean, they've still got arguably the highest ceiling, to reach in the NCAAs. I still think the ceiling's clearly a national championship, like you guys said. There's not a dominant team. There's not a superpower, and it's kind of the way college basketball seems to be shifting. I still have some questions about whether or not we can rebound well enough to win a title. Can we consistently keep people off the glass from getting easy points? When we're running 6 games over 3 weeks, in the tournament, can they consistently every game, keep the opponents from just getting easy buckets like San Diego State did down the stretch? And I think that's what worries me more about how we've been finishing games is that, our main rebounders, Perry and even Joel, late in the game just seem to kind of just want to stand there and block out. They don't attack the ball. And San Diego State really exposed it. I don't know how much that'll get worked over in the Big 12. I really don't know if there's any front courts that are capable of doing what San Diego State did to us. So I don't see us, at least I don't see us just losing the Big 12 conference. I still think that we should win it, if not tie for it. But yeah, I mean, just to answer the question, yeah, I think the ceiling's still as high as it was. I think in terms of being just the elite team everyone thought, I don't think we're going to reach quite that high.
Now, Ryan, don't you think rebounding? I mean, Joel, be honest, he hasn't played against guys that are his size very much. He hasn't played very much at all. Strength and knowing how to use his body is certainly going to help with rebounding. But rebounding to me is want to. And sometimes I just don't see that. To me, Wiggins should be rebounding machine from his position, much like we saw with Rush. Rush was a great rebounder outside of his area. And I'd like to see more of that. San Diego State rebound because everybody crashed the boards. And they got a couple over the back calls, but you know what? They got, 20 points off of follow-up baskets? So to me, it's just want to, and these guys going after it. And that's what I see as improve is. And, we saw Selden diving all over the floor against Oklahoma. I don't know about you guys. I haven't seen a lot of that before that happened, the other night.
No, absolutely. I think we took a step forward in the Oklahoma game. I'm with your point, Matt, that what really hurts this team defensively is when early fouls are called. They don't really know how to respond to it, and some of them just stop playing defense, and it gets us into a world of trouble. I would point out, I think Andrew Wiggins, and people have hinted at this before, I think he suffers from the fact people expect so much from him. Because even you question his rebounding. He's rebounding at about the same rate that Brandon Rush was. Everybody expects him to rebound better, and he probably should because he's a little bit taller than Rush, and I think he's a better leaper than Rush. But I think it's unfair, we put him on. He spends a lot of time guarding the other team's best perimeter player.
Yep.
So it's hard for him to be down there helping. We could do what Duke is doing with Parker and play Wiggins in the post, and I think he'd put up decent rebound numbers.
Keep in mind, this is the first time Andrew Wiggins has played on the perimeter too. He's used to being a power forward and playing a little bit more in the post. Yeah, he plays defense all over the place. Always has. But he's used to playing more of a post role for most of his teams. He's switched to small forward, and that's a tough transition for anybody to make at any level. And he's trying to do it with everybody watching every move, and admirably. He's you mentioned James. His defensive rebound percentage is 12.7. Rushes was 13.1 as a junior. I mean. Yeah, do I wish that Andrew Wiggins would do a little bit more defensive rebounding? Yeah, obviously, there's a few more defensive rebounds out there than what you would expect. But overall, this team's defensive rebounding is shockingly not as bad as I thought it was. It's a little under 30%, which isn't great, but it's not the horrifying numbers that I thought it was. The number that's just terrible is the complete lack of turnover creation. This team is almost 300th in the country in turnover percentage defensively.
Yeah. Well, and that gets to my fear when I look at what I thought our ceiling might be and where I think it is now. My fear is almost entirely on the defensive side, and it's really centered around the fact that with most of our lineups, we can be attacked very effectively in two different places, either at the point or in the post. We've only got one even average post defender, if I had to rate him, and that's Joel, and even he's still getting a feel for the game. And generally, if Mason's on the floor, we're harder to attack, but if Tharp's on the floor and even Selden can both be attacked, that's where we break down. In the past, we've tried to hide one or two poor defenders on the floor, but generally we've been stout in the post and stout on the ball. That's where I worry that our ceiling maybe has come down a little bit. I think any team with a good post player, we're just so vulnerable on defense. We've got to score the ball. It's going to be a very different team than anything Self has put out on the floor.
Interior defense has been a problem, and you got to remember, guys like Selden are learning how to play defense at this level. It's completely different than what they're used to. And Wiggins, Aaron, you mentioned that he's used to playing in the post. I don't want listeners to think he's a post player. He was never a post player. He's more of a hybrid guy that could just do everything that a wing or a post guy could do. You can give him the ball anywhere, and he could turn around. We're not talking about somebody who's doing low post moves in the block very often.
Right.
But to me, his natural athletic ability, much like Rush, makes him a pretty good defender. He's a great, defender. He's got to learn how to play off the ball defense. But guys like Selden, who are physical, he's 40 pounds heavier than most guards. That's tough for him to learn not to be physical against guys because that's what he's used to. You got to play defense with your hands now, with your feet now, and to be able to slide. And these guards laterally, Ryan, I know you probably agree, the quickness laterally to keep their guy in front of them just isn't there.
Yeah, it's not. Really, if we're talking just in terms of the front court in general, even Wiggins doesn't really have that elite side-to-side movement of hands that you can't use. It used to be Rush. Rush wasn't elite side-to-side either, but he had the length, and he could use his hands well enough to keep guys in check. And with Wiggins not being able to do that, really the only guy with that change of pace side-to-side is Mason. And he's the only one really capable of playing defense with his feet, like you said. And the other guys are just trying to make do under the new rules where they're just not quick enough to stay in front some of these smaller guards we're up against.
And people want to give Tarek Black a hard time, but think about it. The guy is a man beast. He's used to playing physical. He's been playing physical for the past 4 years of college basketball. He comes to Kansas, the rules change. Now all of a sudden the guy's supposed to adjust and not play physical. Some of those fouls obviously are fouls, but some of them are just because he's playing how he's used to. He's got to adjust too.
Right.
And to me, it's just everybody's trying to figure out when the world's going. To me, college basketball, the game has already gone down because you got the one and done rule and everything else. So you change the rules to up scoring by calling more fouls. To me, it's just absurd. It's ridiculous. They need to make it to where there's better flow in the game, not kill the flow by having more fouls.
They've got to call it consistently because you'll watch 3 or 4 games in a night if you're like me, and some games you look at and it could have been a game played 2-3 years ago. It's plenty physical. And other games are like ours against Oklahoma where it's just a constant parade to the line. The quality of officiating is so poor that putting in a rule like this was just asking for trouble.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, the quality of officiating is something that just has to be addressed. And I think, you see the verticality issues. I mean, Jamari Traylor had an insane block last night. That was
one of the worst calls I've ever seen.
That was horrible. It wasn't the worst call you've ever seen. It wasn't the worst call this week.
I said John Higgins wasn't making it, so it can't be the worst call ever.
The worst call of this week was
his hair.
The worst call of this week was that foul call on Andrew in the San Diego State game when he wasn't within 2 feet of the guy.
Yeah.
Okay. That was just horrifyingly bad. But I mean, all Traylor did was jump straight up, and Cam Clark jumps into him. Traylor blocks the shot, doesn't bring his arms down at all, and he gets whistled for a foul for doing nothing really. It's really frustrating. It's very difficult to watch.
It can be.
Sorry to interrupt. The one thing I'd say about that is that I tweeted after that I would love to see a show or a website dedicated to just having videos of terrible calls refs make. And my point really of that was they need to be accountable in some way. No more of this, oh yeah, you're right, we missed the call, the Big 12 apologizes. There needs to be accountability for these refs that are making these terrible calls. You get suspended, you get fined, whatever. There has to be something in place to where there's some sort of recourse if they're making these bad calls consistently. And we all saw in slow motion that wasn't a foul. And to me, I think Wiggins, the guy gets the opposite of star treatment on the defensive end.
It's absurd.
He gets called for the most ticky-tack things I've ever seen.
You can't get a call on a drive either. It's ridiculous.
Well, and accountability for refs, I mean, that's something that, hey, let's be honest, it's not been fixed at any level of any sport worldwide. I mean, they have problems with that. There's no accountability for refs at any sport in the country, any sport, in terms of world sports. It's just not something that's enforced anywhere.
And it should be. Everybody else is held accountable.
Well,
sure.
It's an even worse situation in the NCAA for basketball because they've got 350 teams. If you make one conference mad, there's a dozen other that still need a ref just to host games. I mean, the NCAA and refs there's so many problems we could spend an entire show on it, and we'll probably alienate everybody who wants to listen because if we did a call-in show, we could sit here and take calls for the next 6 hours on who horrible refs in the NCAA are.
Well, there's only 12 refs in the NCAA. I mean, you see the same guys every single night. That's another problem. But yeah,
and they drive. John Higgins did the San Diego State game, and talking earlier, he drove from mid-conference. I want to say it was in Indiana or Illinois, and he drove, and there was a snowstorm to Kansas. I mean,
I'm pretty sure that he just turned into bat at night and flew here. I mean, that man works so many games, I don't know when he sleeps, but let's set the refs aside because we're all going to get too fired up about this one. But let's just for the sake of completeness kind of run down the roster and say what we think of how everybody's gone so far this year. I think we've talked plenty about Wiggins and where everybody thinks he is. I think the expectations on him, everybody was right on to start the year. 15, 17 points, 6, 7 rebounds. I wish he had more steals. I think he might if we had more ball pressure. But he's pretty much been what I thought. I'm hoping he makes that jump now. Is anybody honestly disappointed with him, or is the media just completely out of line?
Well, I get a kick. Billis did it last night. They talk about, he had unfair expectations coming in. It's not fair to him. He can't live up to the hype. And then he turns around and criticizes him like he's a senior. He's like, oh, he's got to attack the rim and finish better. He can't bring the ball down. Well, Jay, he was splitting two defenders and he didn't get a call. What do you want him to do? You can't go up and try to dunk. These guys know when they can dunk because, they're up in the air, which almost nobody can relate to when they're watching the game because not very many human beings can do it. And to me, it's ridiculous that you hear these media types saying, oh, it's not fair to him. He can't live with the hype. Next LeBron. Well, anybody who said next LeBron was insane. No, the thing that he's the best high school player since LeBron. Just like LeBron was the best high school player since whoever before him. That doesn't mean you're going to be the next. And to me, it's ridiculous to say that it's not fair to him to live up to the hype, but then you turn around and criticize things without thinking, oh my God, this is, his 13th college game ever. And he's averaging over 15 points, which by the way, most Kansas freshmen don't average over, the best freshmen don't average more than like 13 a game. I mean, to me, it's just ridiculous that people will look at it that way. Yeah, he's done fine. And I think the next evolution of his game is that we'll see, obviously, like I mentioned, I'd like to see more rebounding outside of his area. But instead of having the 3 for 10 or, 4 for 14 shooting nights, to start getting the 8 for 14 or 8 for 16, a little bit better instead of making 2, 3, 4 shots a game and getting to the foul line, which he's done a pretty good job of, making more of those field goals plus getting to the foul line. That's how you turn 15, 16-point games into 20, 25-point games.
And has there been a more impressive play in college basketball this season than his block of Jabari Parker?
No. And you know what? His defense, where he got called for that ridiculous foul, as we were talking about earlier, when he guarded Jabari Parker, he shut him down. I mean, that's the bottom line.
That block on Parker is the most amazing play. I'm not sure I've seen a more impressive athletic play, and I've been watching college basketball for a long time. He's straight up down in the defensive stance with his hands out. Parker shoots a fadeaway jump shot, and Wiggins rises up and blocks it. Parker's an inch taller and shooting a fadeaway jumper, and Wiggins blocked it.
Well, and it got absolutely no run on that broadcast either. I mean, they acted like it basically didn't happen because the narrative had already been written that Parker was having an outstanding game, and he is. But at some point, I hope that ESPN and others will learn to distinguish between a guy who's a shooter can come in as a freshman and make an impact, especially at Duke, where they're going to run him off screens and let him put shots up. The fact that he's scoring more points doesn't really mean a whole lot to me in the grand scheme of things when I'm looking at the two players.
That is a great point. That people don't understand that. They play in space, they play in gaps, they rely on, kicking it out to guys and letting them shoot open jumpers. But what Duke doesn't do, they don't play defense, and they don't usually get a whole lot better throughout the year. They're either they get guys and they make shots, but if they don't make shots, they're open for losses. And to me, that's a great point that you make. And Andrew Wiggins is not a shooter. I mean, he's somebody that can shoot and can't get hot, but that guy's, what people used to go crazy over J.R. Giddens and Rush and you can name the wing, even Ben. Why isn't he driving to the rim more? Well, you are now seeing the best player in college basketball that can take it from outside the 3-point line to the rim better than anyone.
No, I'd agree with that assessment. I think the kid's gotten an unfair shake, and I'm with you. He is basically 1 or 2 good bounces a game at the rim or learning a little bit of how to finish from putting up outstanding stat lines, and I think it will happen before the year is over. He's just too talented for it to not.
He's going to drop a 40 in a big game. He's going to drop a 40 on Baylor or Oklahoma State or Iowa State.
You know who he's waiting for, Ryan.
It's coming.
Who's he waiting for? I'm lost.
I believe Oklahoma State. Marcus Smart.
Yeah, he's and let's face it too, with their lack of size, I mean, and the way they play defense, which is really aggressive and they don't really sit back, especially not, given their size now. Yeah, I think that's the one. Baylor's another one just because of that lazy zone they play. That just screams Wiggins to me because he's so good in the little pockets of space that can beat a zone. And I think that's where he's at his best. And we haven't really seen the best of him this year because, the two things he did so well before he got to Kansas was dunking in transition and really playing the little, 14 to 16 foot basketball that you see a lot of in the NBA. And there's no spacing in Bill Self's offense, to be fair, for that kind of play, and especially not at the college level where they can zone and there's no rules against it. It kind of takes away some of the things he does best.
Absolutely.
And not to mention that's what other teams are doing is trying to take him away.
Yeah. And that's so tough for a freshman who's not just adjusting to the pace of the game, but also, usually the person trying to adjust to them taking them away is somebody who's a junior like Thomas Robinson. He was an energy guy for a while, and now he's learning to deal with that. Wiggins is getting it all fed to him through a fire hose.
All right, somebody else on the roster. Let's pick on. What are your thoughts on Wayne Selden so far?
I think Wayne's been pretty good. People have been overly harsh on him.
Well, you were pretty high on him before the year too.
Absolutely. I love the size. I love big physical wing players. I just think that he struggles because he's not getting the volume of shots that he got, and this is one of. We'll address this pet peeve probably when we cover K-State and Marcus Foster. You put Selden on a team with less talent where he can take 12, 15 shots a game, and a lot more people would be talking about him, and I think he would have rounded into form a lot quicker.
I'd agree.
I think he's adjusting like a typical freshman. We get used to these super freshmen coming in and taking the stage by storm, and partially because all the freshmen before them left. But I think Wayne Selden's adjusting like a typical freshman, and I think we're going to see a lot more games like last night. This is one of the reasons that Bill Self's teams come together over the break. They get so much time to practice, and they get a little downtime, and they get time to be there with their teammates, and watch Wayne Selden become a lot more comfortable as his role on this team expands into being more of a leadership position.
Well, sorry, do you guys find it odd that people just forget that Derrick Rose wasn't freaking Derrick Rose until, halfway through their conference season?
Not at all. All 90% of the media and the viewing public only remembers the tournament.
And let's be honest, it was Derrick Rose versus Conference USA. I mean, there's a big disparity in talent there.
And he wasn't that great for a chunk of that.
True.
Heck, Anthony Davis. I mean, we don't have to go back to Derrick Rose. We can go back to Anthony Davis 2 years ago, who didn't get a whole lot. I don't even know if he was on many mid-season All-American teams.
Right.
I mean, the guy was good early, but I'm not sure he was on a whole lot of mid-season All-American teams. And the guy goes on to win Player of the Year and unjustly win Most Outstanding Player of the Final Four.
I love how you threw that in.
Yeah, well,
I would ask you to qualify that, but I'm not sure how you really could. But we'll,
the guy was blocking shots without even being near KU's postman.
He went 1 for 11 from the field. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist doesn't block that shot of Tyshawn Taylor, and Kentucky doesn't win that game.
Actually, rephrase that. If Tyshawn dunks the ball.
Yeah, I was sitting right there courtside. He had to dunk, and he got scared.
Have you ever been that high? How can you complain about somebody not dunking?
Actually, I have been that high. It's been a long, long time.
Back to the question about Selden. I think it's interesting that we were talking about roles, and I think a lot of people always fail to realize that Self tends to have fairly defined roles in his offense, even though he may not distinguish between which players play him. And Selden's kind of been pigeonholed into the guy that shoots threes this year. McLemore kind of did that for a while last year where he hovered around the perimeter and just shot threes. And Rush has done that and guys in the past. And that really wasn't Wayne Selden's game. Before he got to Kansas, he wasn't a three-point shooter. He could hit the occasional shot, but really he was a power, attack and create guy. And they've kind of shifted that role over to Wiggins. And so Selden's the one that's kind of had to hang out around the perimeter and take shots. And I think it's taken him a little longer to adjust his game to that role than people probably expected him to adjust.
Yeah, he's not a shooter.
Right, exactly. And I think he's being asked to play that role by self. And he's done it pretty well the last couple of games. His shot's starting to fall a little more consistently. He's starting to release the ball a little better.
Well,
but
clearly,
you can tell
because it's not behind his head, clearly.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, if Andrew Wiggins doesn't come to Kansas, Wayne Selden still starts, but he starts as the small forward.
Right, he's playing that guy, the Travis Relaford, that does the attacking and the moving through the offense.
And I think a lot of KU fans would be more at home with a roster either without Wiggins or Selden if you're down one of the two, because you probably would have forced more shooting onto the floor. And that's been kind of the hard part to watch this year and get a feel for, is we really have two guys who want to get to the rim, and we still want to play those two post players in the post. The floor has just been kind of crowded.
Well, I said it before the season. It's going to be an interesting year for Kansas fans. I wasn't even thinking the schedule was going to be this difficult and we'd get here with 4 losses. But I thought this is a conference that lines up for us at being so young to finish second or oh my gosh, even third or fourth. But with the huge talent, just the immense talent, I think we have two that if they both leave, we have the top 2 picks in the NBA draft potentially on this roster. If Selden were to leave, he's a lottery type pick. We have all this talent. It's an interesting year to be a Kansas fan because if we gasp, finish third or fourth in the conference, but run off to the Final Four or win a national championship, it's because this team is set up to grow and expand in ways that we haven't really been used to.
Well, let's talk about that other potential top 2 pick. Possibly my favorite player. I've been high on this guy really since we signed him, and I got to see him at a late night in the open practice for the first time in a little game action. Joel Embiid. He's got to be the absolute key for us. Somebody posted a stat early in the year of our plus minuses with him not on the floor and on the floor. And this was 6-7 games in, and we were +1 without him and something like +40 or 50 with him. Is he the biggest difference maker on this roster?
Absolutely. He's the only post defender we have.
I would agree. Well, I think it's plain and simply, he's the biggest matchup problem in the country because there's nobody in the country that can defend him when he's in the post. I don't think there's anyone big enough or talented enough. There's no Jeff Withies or Anthony Davises down low that can stop him when he's on his game.
And even if there are, he gives that little dream shake. Seriously, it's unbelievable. As long as he stops shooting one-eyed 15-foot jumpers, we're going to be all right.
Yeah. And we saw last night, or the one thing that he did struggle with was he was forced to guard smaller guys. He was guarding Cameron Clark for a stretch there game against Oklahoma, and that's tough for him.
It's just wrong. It was just wrong.
Other than that, especially once he learns how to make those good passes out of a double team, that should open up the offense a little bit for everybody.
And I think he's handled the double teams well for someone with his level of experience. He doesn't panic. Our guys don't always make themselves terribly open in useful parts of the floor. He's shown even all the way back to the Duke game that if somebody gets open where they can score, he's pretty decent at finding them for a kid with 3 years of game experience.
Yeah, you can tell it just takes him a few extra seconds just to react to it. You can tell it's just he has to back up a step or two just to analyze what's happening before he can react and make a play. It's just not instinctual for him.
Absolutely. I think his defensive development is the key for us because I don't think we're keeping people out of the paint. We need somebody in the paint to kind of clean up the mess.
Well, from where he was in October to now is amazing. What he's going to be in 3 months from now should be even better.
And the funny thing is that, Matt, I don't know if you had a chance to see him at all last summer, but the one chance I got to see his team, he barely played. It's not like this was a kid that was out there scoring 20 and 10, against AAU kids and dominating. The kid, from what I saw, I think I saw maybe 2 games of that Florida team, and he didn't play at all. He barely played, and it was basically the Chris Walker, Brandon Green show. And Casey Hill, right. And Joel Embiid was just the guy everybody showed up to watch dunk in warm-ups because he could dunk through his legs and he could do a whole bunch of 360s and crazy stuff, but he never played in the games.
Yeah,
at least not in what I saw.
When he was at Montverde for the year, he sat behind Dakari Johnson. I don't think anybody in the country would take Dakari Johnson over Joel Embiid right now.
Oh, exactly.
I'm sure John Calipari would. You guys don't know what you're talking about. But
well, the other post player we have to talk about is Ryan's favorite defender on this whole team. And I think as great as Embiid's been, Perry Ellis's defense has been better in the last couple of weeks than I quite frankly ever thought it would be. And he's got this bizarre stat, where when he scores 15 a game, we win, and when he averages 7 points a game in losses. Well, what are your thoughts on Perry, guys?
Do you want me to go last?
Yes, you have to go last, and you may be dropped from this
you should
program
probably go
during
first.
the THARP call. So we'll let you go straight from Ellis right into THARP. That way you can just roll right through it. And we'll just, in post-editing, we'll go ahead and tell people what to fast forward to if they don't want to hear it again. But I have watched Perry since he was in high school. I'm originally from the area where he played, and I know a few people who coached against him. I love Perry as a kid. I haven't seen the defensive improvement you're talking about, Aaron. I just haven't. It's there at times against the right kind of matchups. He can play passable defense, but he terrifies me when we run up against other physical fours. If there's a team with two physical post players, he just shrinks on offense, and he wants no part of it. You can see it 5 minutes into the game. You saw it right at the start of the San Diego State game that he was afraid to take it to the rim, and he needs to do it and just get fouled. Because his defense, however much better it gets, it's not good enough that he can be on the floor and score 6 points.
Yeah, okay. Perry, here's one of the things that I would say is about keeping it in perspective. He didn't play a lot last year. His offensive production is too good to not have him playing. And like you said, when he scores, KU wins. Defensively, he has improved. He's had to learn to play with his feet a lot more on defense and get in front of guys. But his ability, his quickness allows him to guard guys that like to bring it outside a little bit. But he does need to get better. He needs to continue to get better. But to be fair, he hasn't played that much either. And he's working to improve that part of his game as well. In the San Diego State game, Coach Self mentioned that in post game that he was sick, so you got to give him the benefit of the doubt there. But you want to see him continue to get better. And my thing is like when we play Iowa State, who's he guard? They're gonna be small. Does he guard Edgem? Because that's where he's gonna have to really step up to be able to guard those guys.
Who does he guard when we play Oklahoma State now? I don't.
Brian Nash.
Yeah, that's a little terrifying.
Well, it depends what LeBron Nash you get.
Yeah, Nash hasn't been stepping out this year like he would in years past. I'm fine if Nash beats us by beating Perry Ellis, as long don't lose to Smart and particularly don't lose to Forte. But Brian Nash is the least of my worries, I think.
Markel Brown going off for 37 again would be a problem, I guess. But Perry, I don't think he's been great defensively. I think he's been better defensively. It's one of those things. Ryan gets bashed for it, and I get bashed for it to a lesser extent. But Perry kind of is what he is. He's a very polished. He's one of the most polished post players to come into college basketball in a while. He's got great moves down low. But he's a decent scorer. I posed this question earlier on the board or today on the board. My question is, is it chicken or egg with Perry Ellis in the points though? Does Perry Ellis score a lot of points and that makes us win? And are we winning because Perry Ellis is scoring, or is Perry Ellis scoring because we're winning? I don't know that there's an answer. I don't know that there's an answer to that. It's an interesting thing for me. I would say that in the case of the San Diego State game, if Perry Ellis scores, because he's, instead of shooting 1 for 8 from the field or whatever it was, he shoots 6 for 8 from the field. Yeah, I would say that we win the game because Perry Ellis was scoring.
Well, and I agree with you. I think for me, the way I'd state it more is for Perry to justify his place on the floor. He's making his lunch money on offense. He can become a better defender, but the entire time he's at KU and whatever his professional career, wherever it takes him, he's going to make his due by putting the ball in the hole.
Well, let's keep in mind that it doesn't start with Perry on defense. The guards have got to keep guards out of the lane.
Oh, absolutely.
Creating these bigs having to rotate. Perry last year played with a veteran team that knew how to defend, had maybe the greatest shot blocker we've seen in college basketball since, or at least one of the top 3 in the last, 15 years. So you could rely on somebody behind you. To me, it doesn't start with Perry on defense. It's being able to rotate and having to rotate all the time, and then you leave a guy open. That we're asking a lot of a guy who hasn't. Frankly, this is the main season of him getting a lot of PT and gaining a lot of experience, and that should improve just as well as everything else.
Those are all great points. Should we go ahead and clear the floor for the prosecution? And we'll go ahead and let him make the case against Ellis.
I want Daniel on a call for this.
Start with Perry and go straight to Tharp, and we'll catch Tharp with Cedeno later another time.
You got it. I'll say this to start off with Perry. Look, to earn his money on the floor for KU, he just has to show up, because at the end of the day, whether Perry's scoring or not, he's still a lot better than the other options. More so than Tharp is better than the other options. Perry is worlds better than our other options on the bench, and there's just not a whole lot that can be argued otherwise, unfortunately. And say what you will about the rest of the bench players, but Perry's a really, really good player.
And I'll just to quickly interrupt. I love Jamari's been playing his butt off, and I love to see that.
Yeah, I mean Jamari, and we'll add Cedeno's thoughts at another time on that one. But yeah, Jamari's had a much better stretch of games lately than I actually honestly thought he was really capable of. But getting back to Perry, defensively, there's 2 different Perrys. There's Perry playing post defense, and there's Perry playing perimeter defense against a undersized 4 or a big wing, if you will. And honestly, Perry's fine when he's guarding the perimeter. He's quick. He moves his feet pretty well for a guy his size, and he generally has decent instincts of when to not foul. And I honestly think against mismatches, especially against a guy like Nash, who's going to try and post him up or take him out, Perry actually, that's a decent matchup for him. It's the guys that can physically go at Perry and really just get into him and bump into his chest and push him down on the blocks. Perry just doesn't handle it well, whether that's maturity or lack of strength or whatever. It's just not something he handles at this point. He might get better at next year or the following. But I mean, there's defensively, I've always viewed Perry, there's 2 different. There's the matchup in his favor, which is when he has to guard a smaller guy. And then there's the matchup that's not in his favor when he has to face a guy his size that likes to beat him up.
I've seen
who's been good at that? What power forward has been good? Thomas Robinson was not a good defender.
Right. No, I'm not saying he was. And really, honestly, there haven't been many under Self that have been. It's not like we should expect Perry to be an elite defender. I think Perry gets problems more for me defensively just because I don't see the effort rebounding. Obviously last night was the first night, I think, in some time, maybe only the second time this year he's been in double-digit rebounds. And given the lack of rebounding on the rest of the team, that's pretty unacceptable for a guy of his talent, his ability, especially with his athleticism at his size, to only be averaging 6 rebounds a game. It's just, I don't understand it. I mean, and like Matt said earlier, it's an effort thing. It's a want-to thing. And for me, that goes under defense with him. He doesn't rebound well enough, and he doesn't defend well enough. It just kind of combines to make him a subpar player on that end of the floor. But like I said, too, he's fine on the perimeter. And honestly, he's better than Thomas ever was on the perimeter as a defender. And I think that's proven out as we play some of the smaller teams. And like I said, I think he's a good matchup for when we go up against LeBron Nash at the 4. Just because Nash isn't a super quick 6'7", and he's not a super strong 6'7". He just doesn't have, unless the Nash shows up and he's just on fire, it's going to be tough for him to beat Perry in the post.
So you like Perry defensively against like Iowa State Monday night?
It's different because didn't Edgem have? I mean, I'll say this: I'm not sure how they're playing. Is Niang playing as a 5 and Edgem as a 4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Edgem's a lot tougher because Edgem's just a physical, gritty kid, and I think more so than Nash is. Nash is kind of a, I hate to use the word flake, but he's kind of a flake on the floor, and Perry doesn't really get bothered by guys that aren't just going, every single play 100% at him. And that's how Edgem is. He's a real tough, gritty guy. I mean, he just, plays a lot like Traylor's been playing, actually, just with more talent, just hardcore. And that's a little bit rougher matchup for him, opposed to Nash.
I think Edgem's a legit perimeter player. Nash, you can play him on the perimeter, but Oklahoma State's kind of given up on that at this point.
Well, they have to. I mean, and honestly, before Cobbins went down, they were doing that too, because Nash, when he got to Oklahoma State, was never a true perimeter player. When he played for
he wanted to be.
He wanted to be, but he did most of his, kind of like Shabazz did. He did most of his damage within 5-6 feet of the basket, kind of overpowering players playing in the post. And he's done well at that for Oklahoma State this year, because he is a talent in the post. He's got post moves. He's got good instincts down there. He's just not quite big or long enough to take advantage. To take advantage of it like they seem to want him to do.
And let's be honest, Monday night, that if DeAndre Kane gets off on Tharp and Mason and those guys, that's the problem.
Well, and that's what you got to decide too, is do you risk Tharp on him, or do you just start the game out with either Selden or Wiggins on him, because he's going to be the one that makes that team go. And
in Ames, the fouls and the ticky-tack stuff that Wiggins gets, boy, that's a tough decision.
Yeah.
Well, and you just have to wonder with Wiggins' size, can you just say, hey, play off of him 3 or 4 inches, don't get up on him? Because Kane's only, I think, 6'2", maybe 6'3". He's not big. He's not huge, at least compared to Wiggins. And you might be able to tell Wiggins, hey, contest his jumpers from 2 or 3 inches back and just don't let him drive. And maybe you can try and contain Kane's explosiveness. But the big thing, and this will be something we should talk about too, because Kane is probably the best in the country right now at it, is he goes end to end in a flash, and he finishes like no other
on the transition defense.
And it's been terrible. Yeah,
absolutely. Let's go ahead and polish off our own starting lineup. And what's everybody thinking of Nadir Tharp? He is a controversial player, always has been. At KU, I'm of the opinion that Nadir Tharp is personally messing with both Ryan Noel and Aaron Cedeno just for yucks. But it's been hard for me not to like the kid. I mean, watching him personally, you like him because he's got the stones to take some shots that the team has needed taken at times. Sometimes he takes shots that the team hasn't need taken. And I've kind of, just talking casually with my brother about this, I've said, Tharp seems to make all the shots that make me cringe and turn around and go, oh, God. And then it goes in. When he takes the ones that I'm begging him to take, he doesn't shoot it quite as well. But his main job is to manage this team, and that's been, at best, an up-and-down affair this year.
He's got to know when to take some of these. The San Diego State game where he jacked up the 3. Late in the game. That's not what Kansas needed. I think they were down 4 at the time. That's not what Kansas needed then. There's plenty of time left. And then last night he's balling, but sometimes I think he gets in hero mode and wants to get it all back really quick, and he just can't do that. And sometimes I wish he would realize that the best slasher in the country is right next to him and give him the ball. But yeah, you're right. He takes a lot of shots where you're like, oh, okay, that went in.
Yeah, I think – go ahead.
The group that I was with in Chicago, I think, summed it up the best. Nadir Tharp, on his epithet, will say, Nadir Tharp, here lies a man who had more swag than he ever earned. And the kid just –
wow.
He's got so much swagger, but I'm like, you're just not that great, Nadir. You know, you've got, like Matt said, you've got the best slasher in the country right next to you. Throw him the ball.
We saw that against Oklahoma, by the way. Give Selden or Wiggins the ball and let them get to the foul line and put that game on ice, and OU never makes that late run.
But let's put it into some perspective with Tharp. He is a very good college basketball player. He may not be the right fit for Kansas, but he would play a lot of minutes at a huge number of schools in Division
Sure.
I.
And I don't think anyone would ever argue that, you know, and that's, I think, some things I think fans take it, especially when I tend to say it, you know, I tend to get the reflex back from them being pretty harsh. And I think they tend to take it out of perspective when it's all relative to the team he's on. You know, it's all relative to the team he's on, the conference he's in. Yeah, I mean, you could put him on K-State. He'd probably be their best player. I haven't seen a bunch of K-State. I could be wrong. But I mean, yeah, I mean, you could put him on a lot of teams, and he becomes immediately their starting guard, and that's fine. I think, you know, and I think without getting into the, you know, what does Tharp do well, what does he not do well, I think he's more or less been a guy caught between two worlds for the last 2 years. Does he come in and does he just throw the ball around and make passes, or does he come in and does he shoot? Because he's a guy that can do both well, and I don't think he's ever figured out how to balance his own game.
But that's what makes a great point guard, is knowing when to get your teammates going and get them hot, and knowing when you need to step up and make a shot.
Right, and I think if you ran down his scouting report, and the biggest negative I've always had against him, back to when, you know, he was in AAU ball with Tarzewski and Alex Murphy and under John Carroll and all those guys, you know, his decision making. He didn't ever act like a point guard on the floor. Yes, he had all the point guard skills. He could make flashy passes and he could make good entry passes and he can shoot and he can dribble, but he just never acted like a point guard in terms of what decision does he make on each possession that best benefits the team. And a lot of times it was a jump shot, you know, a fadeaway that he takes off the dribble, you know, 5 seconds into the shot clock, which, you know, sometimes he does that and sometimes he comes in and runs the offense. And I think Self, if he had any other options that he was really comfortable with, would sit him after that stuff. But the reality is he's just got to live with the ups and downs that is Nadir, because he just has never figured out how to balance himself.
And honestly, for the last few years, he's had to live with ups and downs of his point guards. Elijah, exactly. Tyshawn would have 10 turnovers, but then do something that would blow your mind.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you just had to, going back to Sharon was probably the last one he really, you know, fully just outright trusted on the floor.
For whatever reason, Sharon went on a basketball court and knew he was better than everybody else out there.
That's what made him great.
Yeah.
Well, that is talent, but beyond that.
Well, you know, Nadir, it's decision making. It's everything in between the head for me, in between the ears, and it's the decision making. He doesn't know when to make his teammates better and when to take shots, and he also has this just unbelievably annoying tendency to get lost in the game. And I go back to the most Tharp play ever to me was that Oklahoma State game last year. He hits the shot in double overtime that eventually wins the game, takes the lead, comes down, and then is standing there watching the ball on the rebound off that, I believe it's Nash or Brown took that shot from the wing. And he's just standing there watching it, and Forte just runs right past him to get the ball. Just runs right past Na to get the ball because Nadir's just sitting there watching what's going on. And that's, I think, what drives me craziest about Nadir Tharp is that he seems lost in the game sometimes. And for a junior point guard, it just drives me crazy.
Okay, well, moving on from kind of looking at the roster we have and at least the starters, and we'll some other time probably circle back around to the bench. We started Big 12 playoff. It was, as we all discussed, a pretty good win against Oklahoma. KU's next week coming up. We get K-State at home on Saturday, and then we're on the road for Big Monday at Iowa State, which is sure to be a tough place to play. What's everybody think of the Wildcats so far? They had an absolute turd to start the year when they lost a really bad team right out the gate, and they lost several games to start out, and it's kind of turned for them a little bit.
Didn't they lose by 30?
Legit?
Didn't they lose by 30 to Georgetown?
They dropped to Northern Colorado by 2. They lost to Georgetown by 27, and they lost by 7 to Charlotte. And since then, they've managed to beat Gonzaga. They beat Oklahoma State, which I think it's hard to determine much on that until we see where Oklahoma State goes, minus Cobbins.
Well, and Oklahoma State was also without, what's his name? The kid got, the backup point guard got arrested right before that
Stevie
game.
Clark.
Right?
Well,
Stevie Clark was out for that one.
And Smart had foul trouble in that game. Not a lot of people in this area might have watched it because the Chiefs playoff extravaganza was going at the same time. But
hey, KU plays better defense than the Chiefs.
That's right.
That was a depressing show to watch if you were a Chiefs fan, but you could see that coming for about an hour in that game. Anyway, is K-State for real?
I'll say this. I haven't seen a ton of them yet this year. I mean, I think Marcus Foster's, I think they've kind of found essentially a guy to replace what they lost with Pullen a few years ago, just a guy that's going to come in. He knows he can hit shots. He knows he's the best player on the team, and he knows he's going to be the centerpiece. I think they tend to just really lack inside. I mean, Gibson is a guy I thought that would be a little bit better by now for them. I liked him a lot when he was in high school. And I just think he's kind of underperformed since he's got there, relative to kind of what I expected him to be, just because he's kind of a brute force in the paint.
Big body, soft hands.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just never come together. And part of it could be just, this change in coaching and things like that. I'm not sure they're legit. I kind of expect, at least when KU plays them, that it's not going to be close or not necessarily close in score, but just feels like a KU win all the way through.
I agree with that assessment. K-State, this is what K-State is. K-State is a very, and I'll become really unpopular really quickly. K-State's a very well-coached team. Bruce Weber is not a bad coach. You give that guy talent, and he's a really good coach. He's a good basketball coach. His teams get better through the season. He's really good at X's and O's. He's a terrible recruiter, and where his teams will falter is when he doesn't have talent. They seem to have found something this year that's going to work for them. And so are they legit? I don't know that they're terrible, but I don't think that they're legitimate contenders for the Big 12. I would expect them to finish around 500, 10-8, 11-7, maybe as their ceiling kind of range. I expect Kansas, like you said, Ryan, I expect Kansas this to feel like a Kansas win basically from the outset, especially at home. And I expect this to just be, one of those games that we just have come so used to in the Big 12.
Well, and I'll circle back on Bruce Weber. I've been highly critical of Bruce Weber in the past, not as an overall coach. I think he's an okay basketball coach. I think that the media is completely wrong on him. He is a better defensive coach than he is an offensive coach, and he has been for years. His teams are good offensively when he has talent, but they're always good defensive basketball teams. I think he's a much more defensive coach than anybody gives him credit for.
Okay, I don't think K-State is horrible, but I don't think they're that good either. I think they're somewhere in the middle. I think Bruce Weber is a really good system coach. I think he's really good about coaching his system. I don't think he's a great in-game coach. That's two different coaches to me. Where I think Self can put in a system, and Self makes great adjustments in games, makes great, calls during games. For instance, throwing a triangle 2 randomly on somebody, where Roy's still trying. I think he's looking up what a triangle 2 is right now. But so, if they're playing a team to where his system can be very effective, I think that they play very well. When they're playing a team that not only prepares for their system, but also can make adjustments throughout a game to make it even harder for them, I think that's where they struggle, and that's where the talent disparity, especially between a KU and a K-State, can really take place. You can really see it. And I agree. Saturday, I think, it might be a 10-point game for a lot of it, but I think that you'll never feel that KU isn't in control.
Well,
kind of like the second half yesterday. Right?
Yeah.
We're just an awful matchup for them. I mean, Ryan talked about Gibson. I think he's actually played pretty well this year. I think he's their key, but he's a below-the-rim, flat-footed player, for lack of a better description. And if Joel Embiid just stands straight up, Thomas Gibson's going to struggle mightily on the offensive end. And we've got a lot of length to throw at their perimeter guys that'll keep them from shooting the ball really effectively as long as we move our feet a little bit. They don't have the kind of players that scare me too terribly much.
I'd love to see what Thomas Gibson could do on a football field, though.
Yeah,
that's what he looks like, a defensive lineman.
He is a big boy, but man, if he could drop about 20 or 30 pounds, I think he could be outstanding.
I agree, but he's always been the same. Watching him in high school, AAU, soft hands, get him in the ball in the block, and he can do things with it. He can score, but I think Joel's size will certainly create a lot of trouble for him, and hopefully the KU bigs just learn to just stand there with their hands up. You don't need to put them down. They're going to call that.
Yeah,
I got disconnected. Sorry, guys.
We got you back. I don't think we need to do anything special against Gibson. Don't let Spradling beat you, which he's been awful against KU historically. I think you put Selden on him to give him some length to bother him. I personally put Wiggins on Foster. I'm not enamored with Foster's game either. I think he takes an awful lot of shots. And that goes back to what we talked about with Tharp. If you put Tharp or Selden on a K-State team and let him take all of Marcus Foster's shots, they're probably scoring as many, if not more points than Foster fairly easily.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think at the end of the day, I think Kansas is just better and going to win this game pretty confidently.
I agree.
The Iowa State game is certainly more compelling. KU is probably going to be some level of a dog on that game. And it may be one of the bigger, Iowa State may be as big a favorite as KU's played against since possibly Kentucky in the national championship game. What's KU have to do to win this game, other than the obvious of keeping Iowa State from making a ton of threes?
I think with Iowa State, obviously the key is going to be DeAndre Kane, because right now, he's not only is he just an absolutely elite scorer, the guy's dishing out assists to the shooters like it's nobody's business. I think he's like on KenPom. I haven't looked today, but I think earlier in the week at least he was top 40 in assist rate in the country.
28th today.
Yeah, he's high because basically he gets by guards and really attacks. And, and it's funny, you know what I think he looks like, and I could be completely off here. Somebody may tell me I'm totally wrong. He looks like what everyone thought Elijah Johnson should be. He's athletic, he's strong, he shoots the ball well, and he really just, once he gets his shoulders past a guy, nobody's getting in front of him. And I think it all starts with him. I think shutting down at least one shooter, preferably, a guy like Matt Thomas, who's a little bit taller and is more of a set up and wait for the pass kind of guy. I think if we can get at least one of our guards, hopefully maybe it's a guy like Tharp so we can hide him kind of on there. And consequently, I do think that's something Tharp is good at that he hasn't had a chance to do this year, is play off-ball defense as opposed to on-the-ball defense. And if we can put him on a shooter and try and limit their touches and just let Kane have to do all of the work and just kind of throw bodies at him, I think that'll help. We've got to rebound. I think that's and I think that's going to be a recurring theme throughout the year. We can't let them get offensive boards because they don't turn the ball over. So, and obviously we don't create steals, so we're not going to get any easy buckets. So we just cannot give them easy buckets on offensive rebounds.
And I agree with pretty much everything you said. That the other thing is, a lot like Florida, you got to take care of the ball, because Iowa State loves to get their hands in there, try to rip, get steals, get tips, whatever, disrupt you and turn you over, and then they'll go down and throw an oop or shoot a three. And to me, if you're not taking care of the ball, it's going to be much like Florida. And sometimes Kansas hasn't been run out of the gym yet, and I thought this, you can make, when you lose close games, you can make a lot of excuses in your head, like, if we would have done this, we would have won. We would have done that, we would have won. Sometimes if you just get your butt kicked, and there's no excuse for it, that tends to make you kind of grow up and work a little bit harder. I'm sure you guys are trying, picking up when I'm laying down here, but to me, if they're going to lose, I don't want it to be a close game. I'd rather them get run and have a week to sit on that and think about it.
If we're going to lose, it needs to be, Kane going for 30 and one of their shooters going for 10 or 7 to 10 threes or something like that, and just give Self something to just tear into them and tear them down.
Yep, and have a week to work on them. And by the time Iowa State comes back to Lawrence, they're so hungry and anxious for that game that it's a totally different scenario. But to me, the whole key is, against Baylor the other night, Iowa State looked like they were playing make it, take it. They'd make a shot, and then they'd just take it from Baylor. And then they'd make a shot and just take it from Baylor. And KU can't get into that. They got to take care of that. If they're gonna play up and down and try to put points on, which Iowa State loves to do, KU's got to be putting points up as well. And then you've got to stop Kane. You've got to cut the head off of that offense and make it tough for them. George Yang is going to get his. He's a crafty. He's kind of a bigger Perry Ellis, and he's crafty. He's going to get some buckets that way. But if you're not rebounding and making it tough for them to score, it could be a long night.
Well, and I think the absolute keys for us are how Embiid and Perry Ellis play offensively. There have been a few years that I recall where KU's gone into Iowa State. You're worried about the shooters. But if we can be very, very efficient on the inside, in particular, if we can get someone like Niang in foul trouble early, that'll be huge for us, because then we should control the offensive glass.
And keep in mind, you have no idea who Iowa State is going to get to transfer and be eligible by Monday night. It could happen just like that. You have no idea. They might get 4 or 5 players.
Dante Exum, probably, right?
Him or Shane Behannon, you never know. It could happen at any second.
Behannon coming out of rehab.
That's right. You never know.
My biggest question is whether or not Weatherwax is going to be there. I think that could throw the game one direction or the other right there.
That's very true. That could be hilarious. I hope they show him on camera. Iowa State is. Here's the thing. You guys remember the national title team for Kansas? Man, those guys didn't care where they played. They walked into every arena and they knew they might not always played their best. And would they lose 3 games that entire season?
Right.
But man, you could just see when they walked in there. And Iowa State fans go crazy when Kansas is in there. It's easily the most intimidating place for young guys, and this is a young team, could be, besides if they had to come to Allen Fieldhouse and play, which luckily they play for Kansas. And that team, boy, those guys just walk. Brandon Rush would walk in like, whatever you want to do, man, we're going to kick your ass. That's kind of how he was and how that team was. And that's what I think if this team is going to get there, somebody's got to be that guy to be like, you know what? I don't care what they do. We're going to beat them down.
Well, that has to be Wiggins or Selden, doesn't it? I mean, It's got to be one of those 2 guys for us.
Yeah, and we've also,
And it might take being embarrassed to get that.
It might. And just in terms of just beating Iowa State, they've got to hit some shots to kind of keep that crowd at bay. Because if we're not going to create easy buckets, we're going to have to be efficient, and we're going to have to hit shots and shoot a high percentage from the floor, or we're going to get run, because they're going to hit and take a lot of shots. And we've just got to make sure we're efficient enough to keep it close. Or at the very least shut down at least try and keep that crowd from going insane.
We might have to find out if there's any truth to the rumor that KU is playing or practicing with loud boos coming out of the speakers.
Somebody should suggest that to Self and see what he says.
And pictures of Weatherwax in the stands.
That's right.
But I think the blueprint offensively is what we did last night. I think it's move the ball, find those open. Look, Iowa State loves to get up in your pocket. They love to overplay passes. They love to overplay ball handlers. When you make those guys shift around the defensive perimeter and you move the ball from one side to the other, not lackadaisical lollipop token passes around it, but when you move it like we did last night, you end up with drives to the lane that are wide open. You end up with that Connor Frankamp 3, which I'm still not sure anybody on the Oklahoma team has seen him shoot. you end up with those easy shots that we're talking about being really efficient. The other thing, defensively, I'd approach it kind of a hybrid of what we've talked about. I think I'd like to cut off the head of the beast, but to me, cutting Kane off, scoring isn't the head of the beast. I want to stop his assists. I put Selden or Wiggins on him. I back them off 2 to 3 inches and say, okay, if DeAndre Kane's going to beat me by making 10 threes, that's how I'm going to lose. But I'm not going to let this kid get into the paint 75 times tonight and dump it off to Niang and edge him just for these massive dunks that are going to get them fired up and really turn the tide of this game and get our guys in foul trouble. I want DeAndre Kane shooting over us all night long. If he scores 45 points, then so be it. But I think that if we hold Kane out of the lane and don't allow him to have 7, 8, 9 assists, I think that's where we really cut the head off that offense.
Who do you put on him to keep him out of the lane?
I rotate guys through him. I put one of our bigger guys on him. I put Wiggins or Selden on him and back him off.
And we might see that in the second half. I highly doubt, just for fouls, that we'll see Coach Self start the game like that.
Absolutely, and it would make guys like Cedeno and Noel it would make them infinitely happier if we started with Tharp on him. He got 3 fouls in the first 2.5 minutes, and then we switched to Connor Frankamp.
Well, Tharp's going to have to get close to him to foul him.
I don't know. That didn't happen last night.
Wow.
They do have, I think they've got at least one other small guard that handles the ball a lot. Maybe Monty Morris. I can't really remember. But he doesn't all. I mean, there's at least another guard that you can swing Tharp over to that's not just going to go crazy on him. So it actually does work out well because they're not a huge perimeter team. I think, they've only got maybe one guy at 6'6" playing actually on the perimeter.
They kind of rotate their other guys. They've got Matt Thomas at 6'3", Naz Long at 6'4".
So it's a good size advantage for Wiggins and Selden, regardless of who they're on for the most part. So I wouldn't be surprised if Self starts out with Wiggins on Kane or Selden on Kane just to kind of stop him from. I think the key is going to be: do you put Tharp on him and risk having Kane go off for 10 points in the first 2 minutes? Do you want to take that risk, or do you want to try and stymie him right from the start and get your team into it before you worry about foul trouble for Wiggins or Selden? It's a really tough decision for Self to make.
I'm with Matt. He's gonna start Tharp on him, and not just for fouls. I mean, Bill Self loves nothing better than to challenge one of his guys, especially someone who's supposed to be a leader, to get something done. He's gonna see what Tharp can do on him. The question is how long he'll stick with it.
He'll stick with him right up to when Embiid has 2 fouls and has to leave for the rest of the first half.
Well, Joel's got to keep his hands to himself. It'll be interesting to see who ends up. I think we have a chance to win if their front line gets in foul trouble first. If Embiid's on the bench 10 minutes into this game, it's going to be very interesting.
Well, and if they're playing Niang at the 5, he shoots some threes too. He did last year, and he pulled Withy away from the basket. Or not Withy. Who played last? Withy, right? But they'll probably use that. And they like to shoot threes, but Niang can hit them, and he's going to pull Embiid away from the basket and try to create that mismatch there. Now, he's not quick enough, obviously, to really get by Joel, and get him into the paint and foul trouble, but he will try and pull him out from that paint and keep him away from other guys driving.
And
he's crafty.
Joel moves his feet better than Withy did on the perimeter. He
Just
struggled. He struggled when we matched him up on a guard last night, but Withy was not comfortable at all on the perimeter. Joel looks more comfortable to me.
Well, and it's not so much about the fact that they have to guard Niang. It's the fact that it takes your shot blocker out of the paint and clears things for a guy like Kane to get in and pass his guy. That's just it's pulling him away because he's got to respect that Niang can shoot, and that just opened things up for the rest of their guards.
And it opens up things for if Kane does miss, it opens up things for Niang to be coming down the lane for that rebound, which is much harder to block out.
Yeah. Looking at the week as a whole, I would say Kansas has a chance to really put a stamp on this league if they can get 2 wins. 1-1 is not a disaster as long as the one isn't a loss at home to K-State. Even if it is, if you manage to beat Iowa State at their place, you're still in good shape. But if KU can go 2-0, that puts them firmly in the driver's seat, because Oklahoma State, I think, is going to scuffle a little bit, just given who they've lost and their size.
Well, I would agree. And here's the thing too, is to me, the Iowa State game, boy, that is, it's kind of Coach Self's alley. That is a game that you go in there and win because they're confident. They think they got a shot at the conference title. You know, their fans are going to be all cocky and booing and all that kind of stuff. Boy, that's a chance to send a message that, nope, sorry, you're not close to us.
Well, and hey, look, it's also a chance too, like we said earlier, if things go the other way, it's the first chance Self really has to say, hey, you guys aren't that good, and tear them down and build them back up. And he does that once a year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. And this year it's been tough because every loss is, like I said, you can make some sort of excuse in your head. Well, if we just would have done that, we would have won, or that, or, you know, Perry dropped the rebound or missed the free throw, we would have tied San Diego State. Oh, the Colorado guy hit a lucky shot. We just ran out of time against Florida. Nova hit a lucky shot. You know, all this stuff where sometimes you just get run. That's the time where coach can really get your ear.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot of opportunity on the table this week. That'll pretty much do it, unless anybody has anything else they want to cover. There's a few other Big 12 games this weekend. I don't know that any of them are particularly interesting, except for Oklahoma State going to West Virginia. That's a game. West Virginia is 2-0, but Oklahoma State's got to have that game to stay in the race, I would think.
I forgot West Virginia was even playing in the conference.
Who's West Virginia?
West Virginia. Did anybody catch Oklahoma State? Was it in Texas? Was it last night after the KU game?
Yeah,
I did.
I'm actually kind of surprised. I think Texas is actually a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. I know they've lost 2 to start, but I think they lost I think they lost at K-State or at home to K-State, maybe? Oklahoma. And then they lost to Oklahoma State. I actually think they may come together a little bit more. They're another team that's pretty young. And
they're kind of an addition by subtraction team. It's a very interesting situation there. They've kind of dropped off from that talent level that they expected to have, that they felt is their birthright down there, and those teams that didn't mesh real well for the last couple of years for them. Texas is a better team than like you said, than a lot of people give them credit for. They're not great, but they're gonna push some teams. They pushed Oklahoma State around pretty good last night for a large.
And that was at Oklahoma State too, I think.
Yeah, and that was in Stillwater, exactly.
Didn't they pushed them around so much that I think Oklahoma State shot nearly 50 free throws. So
51. I think.
Marcus Smart had 9 made free throws before he made a field goal. So, you know, it's funny to me to see the media talking about how he busted out of his mini slump by this great game last night. Yeah, the guy had like 20 points from the free throw line. Well, that'll bust a lot of people out of a slump.
Yeah, I just think Texas is one of those that I think they're kind of unfairly regarded. I think they lost a lot. I like their 2 freshman guys they got, Croker and Holland. The guards are going to be really good in the conference for the next couple of years. I didn't think Oklahoma State just dominated them until they kind of wore them down later in the second half. Again, the fouls really put Texas at a yeah, exactly. And I think Oklahoma State, I think it's just they're basically, it's Markel Brown and Marcus Smart. If they get going, you're in trouble, because then once they start getting going, the fouls start racking up and they go to the line all the time, and you're just in such a deep hole you can't dig out of it.
Right. And I'm with you. Texas is going to be a factor in the conference race, in that they're going to beat one of the top 3 teams once or maybe even twice, just because they are a big team in the paint. I really like Holmes's game. I wish we had a guy like him, just somebody a little bigger, a little more physical to throw out there. I really had hoped Tariq Black would be that, but I like what Rick Barnes is doing. I said this last year and the roof caved in on my head, but I do like what Rick Barnes has going on there.
They're a team that would benefit greatly from a guy like a Jamari Traylor. or a Landon Lucas. Those guys would get a lot of run there. I mean,
where
like
at Texas or at Oklahoma State?
At Texas.
Nah, I'll be honest, they wouldn't, because Texas has a pretty good front court.
They got Ridley and eBay.
They've got Connor Lambert, and they've got Jonathan Holmes, Prince eBay, and Cameron Ridley. I mean, honestly, as a front court unit, it's probably one of the best in the conference. Because they've got four guys that all play pretty well. I mean, eBay's probably the furthest from being a top player yet than the other three. But I'd take eBay on our team over any of our bench players in a heartbeat.
All right, I got distracted. I picked front court. I really meant back court. They're just thin. Texas is just a thin team.
Yeah.
They're not deep. And my point is that you take some of the guys off the bench. Andrew White III, and that guy gets a lot of run at Texas because and really helps them, just deepens them out. Nadir Tharp deepens them out and makes them a lot better basketball team.
Here's a question for you: would you take Javon Felix or Nadir Tharp?
Felix. But that's
Anybody
tough.
Getting back to Oklahoma State.
I'll take Tharp. Tharp's my boy.
Wouldn't you guys say that is the most overrated court ever?
It's historic. Show some respect.
I don't need to show respect, man.
They show up for Kansas.
That's it. Outside of that, that is the most overrated, overhyped home court in the country.
I love watching games there. I can hear the players having conversations on TV.
They had a lot of people there last night dressed up as empty orange seats.
Exactly.
It's a hideous color.
Just like Oklahoma sold out their arena for Kansas, apparently a sellout at OU means every other seat is empty.
Well, a couple of years ago, OU threw a bunch of white T-shirts on everything to kind of cloud the issue. If you looked at it, you thought it was full, but it was just empty T-shirts laying on the seats.
Why is it so dark in there?
I'll tell you a good story just about the Oklahoma mindset. Some of my good friends went to college there. We went down to see the KU-Oklahoma game. They had been there for 3 years. We're staying at their apartment. We get up. All right, where do we go to the game? Oh, hell, I don't know. It's just like, I mean, it was just unbelievable. They lived across the street from the football stadium, but they didn't even know where the basketball arena was. So, and it floored me, but different culture down there. So,
yeah. Anybody got anything on the top teams? I mean, I was watching a little bit of the Arizona UCLA game before we started taping this.
Who won?
And what do you guys think about the top in the country right now?
Arizona's good. I don't think they're a national title team. I don't think they're. I don't think they rebound great. I think they got good players. Who's the kid that transferred into guard?
McConnell.
Yeah, that kid's playing out of his mind. He's pretty good about setting guys up.
Well, and hey, look, I mean, I think it's fair to say Nick Johnson's probably been the most not talked about best player in the country so far this year, because he's the best player on the team.
The guy's hitting threes, and I know for a fact I could probably name 10 people that have watched a lot of Nick Johnson, as well as me, that would never have said that guy would be a good three-point shooter, because that's the one thing he couldn't do. He could jump out the gym, but he wasn't a great shooter. So credit to him. He's really worked on that and made it better. But like I said, to me, Syracuse, the team I would not want to be near in the tournament. They're back to that championship team where they were all freaking big except Jerry McNamara, who I'm pretty sure I would still fight to this day.
I'm with you, though. I think Arizona's a little flawed. They've got a gaudy record at this point. There's not a classic elite team out there. I mean, usually if you look around at some of the advanced metrics, by this time of the year, you see a team or a couple teams that have separated their, top 10 offense and defense. Just looking at the profiles, there's not really anybody who fits that.
Mm-hmm.
The people who could get there, Wichita State's close-ish. Iowa's actually close, but I don't think they're getting there. I still think Kansas and Kentucky are near the top as far as ceiling and ability to get to where they're elite on both ends of the floor.
And that's the thing. You watch Kansas, come back and make that run at Florida. Florida's a very, very veteran team. And that shows that Florida's ceiling isn't near as high as Kansas.
Well, if Wiggins get that forearm shiver to his forehead called, that's a it's a different, very different story down there in Florida, which is almost ridiculous because we didn't get run out of the gym that night like we should have after giving up a 23-0 run. Mm. I think Arizona could be national championship good. They've got all the pieces. Tarczewski's playing pretty well right now.
What's their best win, Duke?
Well, so what I was going to say is the big problem is that there's nobody in the country. There's two teams. There's two sides of the coin. You either have played good teams and you have a bunch of losses, or you've played nobody. And that's kind of where we are right now. There's nobody who's played. There's no good teams that have played a bunch of other good teams and come out with one loss or two losses. Everybody who's played anybody has a couple losses.
Here's what I think on. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
The other thing I would say is that if North Carolina can make it out of the first round, you got to watch out for them.
You didn't just say that with a straight face, did you?
No, I didn't. But the point's there. I mean, North Carolina's going to lose to Belmont in the first round, but they're going to beat. Who doesn't think they're going to beat Syracuse this weekend?
I don't.
No.
I mean, unless Page, which I mean, look, Marcus Page could just turn into Marcus Page again for a night and torch him, and maybe they will. I think that's Page a stretch.
Any day of the week too.
That
twice
team,
on Sundays.
That team and that program have some fundamental flaws in North Carolina at this point. Roy has not constructed a good roster, and I don't know that he identifies who his best players are. He lets James Michael McAdoo take way too many shots for that squad.
He's giving them Rafe treatment.
He is, and he's not that good. That team needs to play outside in. It took him 2/3 of last year to figure out that last year's team needed to play that
way. Hey Roy, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Paul freaking Pierce is on your team.
Hey, just getting back to Arizona for a minute, I was going to say the one thing that's interesting about them, I think, is, I mean, I think they're as close to being elite defensively as any team is this year. I haven't seen Syracuse yet. I'm assuming their zone's probably back to being pretty scary. Was
Arizona?
Defensively, they are. I think they're so far they've been pretty outstanding defensively.
They didn't look that great against UCLA.
No, they didn't. I didn't watch the whole game, but they didn't look that great. But I'm saying they've looked pretty solid throughout the year. The interesting thing, though, is that Miller's gone with a three bigs front court, and he's playing a lot of Gordon, Ashley, and Tarczewski at the same time. And that's one of the few things. How do you match up with that in the tournament time?
Gordon's a hybrid, so you could do that with him. He's so athletic and gifted. But
it'd be 6'8", and he's 2. I mean, he's basically Blake Griffin clone, and he's playing the 3. And then you've got a 7-footer, and you've got a 6'10" Ashley. I mean, that's a pretty darn big group to contend with down low. And I think that's part of the reason they've been so good defensively. They just kind of overwhelm opponents right now.
And I don't know how good they've been. I think Duke is their best win, and
right.
I don't think Duke is that good. And UCLA lost to Missouri. I mean, come on. And UCLA's got a bunch of athletes, and they're better than they were. But they're not
Missouri
there yet.
Just lose at home to Georgia? I mean, that kind of puts that in perspective.
Seriously, that's only their second loss, though. They haven't played anybody, but it's only their second loss.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Arizona is necessarily the best team in the nation. I do think collectively they've got a lot of talent. I mean, look, they're bringing Gabe York off the bench. I mean, Gabe York's a guy I think I'd kill to have, or at least I would have killed when we were recruiting him. Because I was a big fan of his, but
it depends Gabe York you get. But,
that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, I think they're fairly complete in terms of they've got all the right pieces. Whether or not Miller keeps them playing at this level all season, and whether or not they get into the tournament and face some teams that can throw different looks at them.
God, who's their toughest? What's their toughest game in the Pac-12?
Colorado.
Yeah,
Colorado is going to be tough.
UCLA and Oregon are a little better.
I don't know if they played 2 against UCLA this year.
I'm not sure how their conference works. So.
I'm looking
no,
at
they do not.
They do not.
But remember, they also way back. They're the only team to beat San Diego State, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Last second shot.
I mean,
no, it was.
No, they beat them by 10. Yeah.
Oh, was it that big?
Yeah.
I seem to remember that one coming down to a late, or was that just? It was close until like the final minute, and then free throws.
Yeah, it was very close. Yeah. But I mean, San Diego State's really good, and Arizona did beat them. That's fair.
At the Aztec Bowl.
Oh, yeah, that must be a crazy home court advantage.
What else do they have to do at San Diego State?
Go outside.
I don't know. San Diego a lot.
I've never been to San Diego. I guess surfing. I'm not sure.
But I just think that here's my thing. I think you're right. Kansas and Kentucky, if they get it, to me they have the potential to be better than anyone is right now. That make sense?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Well, we're talking about easily the two most talented teams in the country. I mean, I don't even know that it's particularly close after those two teams. There's some other teams that are pretty good, but if everybody were to leave right now, I mean, those two teams that have like 7 of the lottery picks.
Kentucky's got 7 NBA picks on the roster.
Right.
Win will get picked.
Yeah, now that's I guess debatable given how they've played so far this year, but
well, I mean, but we're just talking talent wise. I mean, they've got those are the two most talented teams, and so if they get it, yeah, sure, those are the two best teams. But you look and Syracuse, I'm not sure if Syracuse has left the dome yet. So who've they beaten? They beat Villanova, but they haven't done much else. Louisville's good, but they haven't played anybody. I guess the only
Louisville lost tonight.
And they lost Shane Bohannon, which is just, I mean, they lost to Memphis on top of that at home.
And Memphis is loaded with talent too.
Not that they'll ever figure it out, but
but the team that might be sneaky good.
Real quick. I did see a stat right before that. Did you know that was only Pastner's second win versus a ranked team?
Both of them this year. The other one was Oklahoma State.
Look at the conference he's in. Who is he going to play?
Well, now they've moved up. Now they've got Big East teams now.
Now they're with the big boys.
They're in the ACC now, right? Or AAC?
No, they're in the
AAC.
The American
right. Louisville and Georgetown and all those kind of guys.
I'm never going to get that right.
Or whatever it is.
Has anybody seen Wisconsin play?
Yes, and they're good.
That's the team that I want to see play because they've actually played a decent schedule and they haven't lost.
Wisconsin moves the ball incredibly well.
And
you'll
they've
be
got
stunned.
shooters, and they just play well. And here's the thing: it's they play good basketball in that weird Bo Ryan system. It's not like it's just it's a weird system and people don't know what to do. I mean, people have been saying that for 10 years, and Bo Ryan still does the same thing he's done for 10 years or however many years now. But they've actually got it. I mean, Sam Decker's just absolutely a stud.
Here's my thing about Wisconsin. If I'm looking for a good nap, I throw on a game.
Although I think, to be fair, this year they've actually scored at a pretty high clip.
Yeah, they put 95 on Illinois this week.
They just killed Illinois.
That's amazing.
They murdered Illinois.
I think they're adjusted a really high points possession too.
That's their adjusted offense is 4th.
That's 3 times the points they normally get.
Well, they're still 310th in tempo in the country, so they're not playing fast. They're just really, really efficient.
I'm waiting for Bo Ryan to light a smoke on the bench. That's what he looks like to me. Like he's just doesn't he?
Oh my goodness! Yeah. Wisconsin might be the team that nobody talks about that might actually be pretty darn good. And I guess we'll see on Sunday. Monday they play a funky style, but Iowa State could give some people some real fits too.
I could see good fits in the tournament. I just don't have any. I don't think they win the conference.
I worry for Iowa State in the tournament. Same thing you do with traditional Duke teams is as the season wears on and the legs wear out with as many jump shots as that offense needs to take. When you start playing, you play 2-3 games the week before in the conference tournament, you go play 2 games in 3 days, can they make those shots? And when they go to domes, it all kind of works against teams like that for the most part.
I think it's, especially with even Wisconsin and Iowa State, in the tournament, it's going to come down to, do you have the best player on the floor? And I think either of those teams in any given game, they're going to be pretty darn close to having the best player on the floor between Sam Decker and DeAndre Kane. And with Iowa State too, I haven't seen enough of Wisconsin to talk about this, but I know Iowa State, they shoot a lot of jumpers, but when they go inside, they don't miss. You know, I mean, I think their field goal percentage inside the arc is pretty absurd. And they, you know, they do a really good job of being efficient in transition, and they just don't miss inside.
They're shooting 58% inside the arc. It's critical for us to try to keep them out of the paint.
Exactly. I mean, it's an absurd percentage inside the arc this year.
There's a decent chance. I don't. You'd have to go calculate the math on it, but there's a decent chance we'll have one or two undefeated teams at least going into conference tournaments, right? I mean, who's going to beat Wichita State?
Nobody. The Valley's garbage since.
It's terrible with Creighton gone.
Creighton's gone.
I guess right. Creighton's gone, right?
Right, and Arizona. I mean, other than the game at Colorado.
Yeah, Arizona it feels like they'll have at least one slip up because it's a Sean Miller coach team. I mean, come on.
Well, that's true. That's true. And they got. I think they go to Oregon as well. They go to Oregon. They go to Colorado. Those are two losable games. Those are decent teams playing at home in big home court advantage environments.
Well, and no, Colorado's good. I mean, Colorado's just a good team.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. That's what I mean. Oregon and Colorado are good teams.
Conference, to be fair.
Right. Colorado and Oregon are both good teams, and they both have, for different reasons, very good home court advantages. And that, so it's Colorado and Oregon. Those are both games that I'd look for Arizona to potentially struggle in. And it almost always seems like they drop one at the McHale Center. Of course, they play with the worst home court advantage in college basketball. But
Pauley Pavilion would beg to differ. But
well, Pauley Pavilion is pretty bad too. Yeah. The Pac-12 in general has some really bad ones.
Yeah.
Oregon has the best beauty though. That court is so gorgeous.
That court is horrifying. The only one worse is the Florida Atlantic or Florida Gulf Coast now has the beach one.
No, it's not Dooley.
Yeah, I don't know whose that is. Just for traditional courts, I cannot stand the one at K-State where they've stained inside the three-point line. It's a garbled mess. But back to Wichita State, I think they really do have that chance to go undefeated. I mean, they only have 3 more games against top 100 KenPom teams. And, I mean, there's a lot of 200s on there.
All right, their conference is terrible. Terrible. And their non-conference schedule wasn't very good either. It was the best team. They beat Tennessee, right?
Tennessee or St. Louis are both pretty solid squads, but,
I think did they beat Alabama?
They beat Bama, but Bama's not any good. I know you live down there, but Bama
No, I'm
sucks.
just curious because I thought I remember seeing somebody say that. I mean, Bama's just a middling SEC team, which isn't much.
Yeah, they beat Alabama, but that's Alabama is one of the better teams on their schedule.
Really, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's one of their signature wins right now, which is saying something.
Right. So I think Wichita State will be this year's version of Gonzaga. Won't that be hilarious? After beating Gonzaga last year in the second round, driving them all the way to the Final Four, for Wichita State to be that interesting case this year, they have a decent chance with the groupthink to head into the NCAAs as the number 1 ranked team in the country because I don't think they're going to lose, and yet they're going to probably be a number 1 seed, but then get dump trucked in the second round. That'd be
I don't know. I mean, has any team done that from Final Four to number 1 seed and then dump trucked in the second round? I don't know. I'm just that would be pretty shocking if that happened because I mean they are. I mean, didn't they return most of that Final Four team and they're pretty legit?
Yeah, you know that there's a team that did that, right?
I have no idea. Kansas, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Kansas got dump trucked by UTEP in the second round in '92 after going sandwiched between.
Guys, I was 6 years old. I'm not remembering that.
Sandwiched between 2 Final Four runs, by the way. They went to the Final Four '91 and '93 and got dump trucked by UTEP in the middle.
I was in kindergarten.
With Wichita State, let's focus on what's really important.
No
matter how many games you win, we're still not going to end up playing you.
By the way, guys,
they could go 40-0 and win the championship, and we wouldn't play them.
Some breaking news, guys. Jaquan Lyle's not going to make it this weekend. I got a text, but I'm working to find out why. But
is he an upgrade at point guard? Could he play point? I've heard that, but
he played a lot of point guard, but it's more like it's not true college basketball point guard.
I don't think Self would play him at point guard. Let's put it that way.
He's more of a he's a kid that can pass. To me, he's a little bit lesser talented Wayne Selden. He could shoot better, but he's got good vision. He can make good passes. He's got pretty soft hands. Can score the ball. He's a bigger kid, but
he's not terribly athletic.
Yeah, no, not explosive.
He's more of a physical power, kind of back you down and make plays rather than Selden wants to get by you and make plays type thing.
All right. Well, seeing as we're approaching on 2 hours of this, and it may possibly be a rambling mess when we listen to it, but we hope you enjoyed it. We all certainly enjoyed making it, I believe. So I'd like to say that this is brought to you by anybody. We have no sponsors.
But feel free to contact us if interested.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're pitching some sort of god-awful diet that's based on, eating nothing but fried cucumbers or whatever, that seems to be the norm in Kansas City for sponsoring a radio show. So go ahead and drop Matt a line, and he'll get that set up, and you can put your name on this fine, fine program. But other than that, we anticipate being with you every week for the rest of the season, unless we get tired of doing this or just don't feel like doing it that week.
Or Noel just pisses us off.
Yeah, it could happen.
Well, yeah, any hate email you want to direct at Ryan Noel, go ahead and drop by www.TheShiver.com and sign up and send him nasty private messages. We will read any of those on the air next week for you.
I'll respond to all of them.
So, yeah, absolutely. Whoever entertains us the most, we'll read your message in the entirety on the air next week. So,
absolutely.
Again, thank you for listening, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.